data has gotten too big. Whether you're a B2B marketer or a consumer brand, your data needs to be viable, relevant, and accessible so that Stirista can help you retain customers, acquire customers, and make it personal.
Welcome to the Marketing Stir podcast by Stirista, probably the most entertaining marketing podcast you're going to put in your ear. I'm Vin, the associate producer here at Stirista. The goal of this podcast is to chat with industry leaders and get their take on the current challenges of the market. And we'll have a little fun along the way. In today's episode, Vincent and AJ chat with Joe Frick, Head of Partnership Development at Oracle. He talks about how wonderful it is to see brands and customers connecting over the internet. Vincent is crushed by bad news, and AJ is excited for more tennis. Give it a listen.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Stirista's The Marketing Stir. I, of course, am your happy, Hawaiian-shirted host, Vincent Petrofessa, the Vice President of B2B Products here on The Marketing Stir. It's so great to be talking to you, and it's great to be seeing you in person now at conferences. Thank you for coming up to me at conferences and telling me how much you enjoy the podcast. Let me just clarify, it's not droves of people. There's like one or two, but I appreciate it, so thank you. Let's pause for a second. Stirista, who are we? Let's just talk about it just for 10, 12 seconds maybe. We are a marketing technology company. We own our own business-to-business data, business-to-consumer. People utilize that data through our technology to help them get new customers by sending to it. We also own our own DSP, OTT, connected TV. Reach out to me. That rhymed. I meant for it. Vincent at Stirista.com. It is so great to be talking to you. And it is normally so great to be talking to my co-host, Mr. Ajay Gupta. But he shared some bad news with me today, AJ. We're going to get into that in a moment. And it's the worst news, actually, you've ever shared with me. But ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, my Commander-in-Chief, Mr. Ajay Gupta. What's going on?
Hey, Vincent. Believe it or not, I'm actually setting up my fantasy football team. So
oh, nice. So you joined in the league this year.
I am. I don't always do fantasy, but when I do, I will beat you.
Oh, so. Nice. Oh, he's calling us. I don't know if that we have to see about that. So
I'm kidding. I'm trying to avoid bottom place finish this season.
That's good. The Kunkel, as we call it, Will Kunkel, our VP of marketing, he always comes in last. We call it the Kunkel. Yeah. So don't just avoid the Kunkel. So I'm going to share with you. So AJ and I were planning on going to a conference together, and we're still going. The B2B Sales and Marketing Exchange. I'm going at least. So AJ, we had it planned, and he said to me today, very bad news. I'm unable to attend. And I was crushed. On the day I wore my favorite shirt. And that's what he did. It's probably, and come to think of it, you don't usually let me down. That's the worst news you've ever shared with me. So I guess that's a good thing. But yeah, so I'm a little disappointed.
Yeah, I hate to tell you this, but our tennis team got a wild card to a tournament. So.
Oh my goodness. It's nothing for the children. It's nothing for work. It is for the tennis team.
I mean, I figured I would be away for tennis and then to be away another 3 days from the children. So it's for the children. So.
Okay. Yeah. Well, the tennis team is Stirista represented. We are a very good team. I will see if I will forgive you. That might take a little time. You know what helps in making me feel better, AJ? Is this guest today, because this guest is one of my favorite people in not only the industry, in the world. This guy's great. I've known him for so many years, and that's the only thing that's helping me today, because I'm down to the dumps about that news, and especially now because it's for tennis, but we talked about it. But ladies and gentlemen, this next guest, he is the head of partnership development at Oracle Advertising and CX, one of my good friends. We've been board members together. We just hung out 2 weeks ago. And I am not lying when I say one of my favorite people. Ladies and gentlemen, a marketing stir welcome, Mr. Joe Frick. What's going on, Joe?
Good to be with you guys. Thanks for having me. And it's a hot, steamy day in the Northeast, and we're just settling into some pretty warm weather. AJ, I'm sure I don't have to tell you about that, you being down in Texas.
Yeah, it's been 110 degrees here. So.
that's December in Texas. Today it's hot and sticky. We were just talking about it earlier. It's just like walking around. People are like, well, just jump into a car. It's air conditioned. No, it just doesn't happen. I don't own a vehicle in Manhattan, but yeah, it's definitely a hot one. Joe, tell me, how many years have we known each other? I would say
Oh,
15 at least.
at least 15. I have to think our circle started to widen and kind of overlap early zeros. So at
Yeah.
least 15.
And yeah, we just saw each other at our good friend's mutual friend's birthday party
Yep.
recently, and we serve on a board together. We've known you a long time, and I said we must, and AJ said this is too. We must get Joe Frick on the podcast. So, Joe, let's get right into it. And everyone knows Oracle. If they don't, they live under a rock, as I love to say on this podcast here. But tell us about that specific division, if you will, if it's a division, if I'm getting that right, and also your role within the organization.
Sure. No. Well, again, great to be with you guys. Thanks for having me. My remit within Oracle Advertising and CX, and specifically the advertising part, although we are one division, is to drive first-party partnerships. One of our big differentiators in market as a data solutions arm of Greater Oracle is driving accurate, scalable audiences among many other products, accurate measurement, and one of the linchpins of that is really first-party partnerships from, in my case, what we call specialty retailers. So there's kind of a parallel with the former data cooperative business, for those of you listening who know that landscape over the past 35 years, but it's broader than that. It's actually part of data supply into Greater Oracle. So I work with counterparts who work on account management for those first-party relationships. Oracle Advertising itself was built synthetically over the last 8 years. They were subsequent acquisitions by Oracle, starting with Blue Kai. Many individuals know the names of the constituent companies. Blue Kai back in 2014, Datalogix in 2015, which is when Oracle Data Cloud really came into business, the former name of Oracle Advertising, and then 4 other subsequent acquisitions, including Moat, including Grapeshot, and all of these build out sort of the comprehensive data solution suite. That is now Oracle Advertising and a component to Advertising and CX, which is our sort of SaaS for marketing solutions counterpart within this broader division of Oracle.
Fascinating. And thanks for breaking that down, because there's so many different divisions and Oracle's huge. So we appreciate that. Now, Joe, a question we ask all of our guests. How'd you get started in marketing? It's not usually a direct path. So I'd love to hear more how you tell us about that journey.
Sure. For me, it was an absolutely indirect path. Accidental is probably the right adjective to describe it. I was studying, in fact, analytic philosophy as an undergraduate at Rutgers in New Brunswick, and self-financed my education. 3.5 years out of the 5, I worked more than 30 hours a week. Coincidentally, for the US Postal Service, which actually ties into the story in a very odd way. I reached the end of the 5-year plan and thought I would continue on to grad school, but in fact, I took a pause and decided I need to catch my breath, so to speak. And I was a very well-qualified philosophy major, which of course, they're beating down the doors to hire philosophy majors, especially about 30 years ago. Oops, did I just give away my age? So I answered a box ad in the Princeton Packet newspaper, which was circulated in New Brunswick to hire somebody in the mailroom of a mailing list company. And that mailing list company was American List Council, now known as ADSTRA in the landscape. So I had the privilege of working with Don Rappaport's organization. And that's how I started my career, from the mailroom to a sales desk within that first 6 to 9 months, and started to learn data compilation, which was a huge part of B2B marketing, still is. But back then it was all directory sourced. There was no internet. I have this distinction of joining the industry before the internet was commercialized, both for e-commerce businesses, but of course also from data collection. So that's how I found my way in. And it's 28 years later or so, it's kind of evolved into its own special thing. But I had the privilege of working with a lot of great people. ALC, just sheer talent in marketing was enormous. The job I moved on after ALC after 5 years of sort of apprenticeship was my master's class with Adria Rubin and Adria Rubin Marketing and Management, where I stayed for 15 years and made my bones, as they say, under her tutelage and guidance and expertise, and found my way to Oracle in early 2015.
Joe, you mentioned newspaper. What's a newspaper? I'm kidding.
Now, it's not just the thing you line your cat box with. Maybe nobody does it anymore, but I mean, this was how you did the thing. You went and looked at classified ads in the newspaper, and especially as a new college grad, recruiters for philosophy programs were recruiters for graduate programs in philosophy. It wasn't any professional specific trajectory, and I wasn't aware of such things way back.
Yes. How does your philosophy background contribute to your career and work you've done?
A couple of really, I think, important ways. I feel like that particular training, I feel like I'm a naturally curious person, and I feel like the philosophy discipline and the deep dives you would take on these, wildly esoteric questions around all manner of kind of specialized learning, as philosophers had it back then, stimulated natural curiosity. So I feel like as you progress, and again, I've had the privilege of this career of seeing the development of the internet as a commercial giant, right? This kind of venue and channel through which to connect with customers, for brands to connect with customers, to commercialize all manner and forms of supply chain distribution. It is our world at this point. And I think that natural curiosity stimulated and buttressed by an education in philosophy was just helpful in driving me forward to understand more. The changes started to come, and once the dam broke open and the world fundamentally changed, it was just really useful to have trained in kind of deep inquiry, because I just feel like it has made me a better marketer and a better representative for my clients, especially. I also think that the education, as a 5-year student, I completed an undergraduate thesis, and that thesis was specifically around something called two views of human rationality. And this is not too abstract, but in fact, the role I take on at Oracle now, one of the inducements for companies to partner with us at the first party data level is to use Oracle's predictive analytics to drive new customer acquisition. And in doing so, you're trying to understand foundationally, based on transaction behavior, sort of the next logical step. We always say that the best predictor of future behavior is past transaction and buying behavior. And so within the realm of predictive analytics and solid machine learning and artificial intelligence driven modeling, we're in a position to sort of bring to light this idea of kind of what the next step is. And it kind of interestingly ties back to this work I did 30 years ago about trying to understand how you balance out logistic regression and probabilities to understand next best behaviors. Here I am kind of working in that same arena, maybe with a little more of a kind of a privileged perspective, just because I had the training 30 years ago to understand the bigger concept. So a couple of really profound ways it's impacted my career. And I feel very fortunate to have been exposed to that training and then find a venue within which to flex some of those muscles, so to speak.
Yeah, no, that's great. So Joe, tell us a little bit about it. Oracle is obviously quite large. So just focusing within your group, what are some of the ways in which you're marketing your group, and what are some of the channels and strategies that are working for you?
Sure. Broadly, we provide a very specific kind of data solution as it relates to the data first, the first party data division. Companies will contribute their data to our data collective, our retail data collective, in order to take advantage and leverage the sort of combined anonymized transaction behavior. And we're working with hundreds of retailers, over 1,500, and at any given point, several hundred are actively acquiring new customers, providing updates as it relates to their transaction data. It's all asynchronous, so not at any given point do all of them update at once. But companies leverage that combined intelligence to drive really solid modeling. And we work closely and consultatively with our clients on the account management side, whose teams I fuel with these, and my team fuels with these new data contributors, to really kind of identify specific moments or motions. Those could be seasonal motions or movements, especially around retail. Consider any specific events, specific product launches and marketing to kind of isolate seed groups. And in a very traditional sense, in terms of modeling, you power an equation with a seed group and inform that seed group with features of a model, which is all sorts of third-party data, including transaction information from other providers, all of which is anonymously blended into this process by which we then create an equation and score a database, and then provide audiences for activation, both offline and online.
Joe, I know this because I've seen you talk about it. I know it's a passion of yours. You did a great panel on coffee and conversions with our mutual pal, Maggie Genti, we were talking about earlier. But what drew you to data privacy? And I also, I want to piggyback on that. And what is in data civics? I've heard you talk about that a lot. And same question, and what should a consumer look like for privacy? What should a consumer for privacy look like, I should say?
The data civics is this, and I'm not the originator of any of it, but there seem to be, and present company included, there's marketers today are not only just legally compelled, because at the state level there are specific governing laws about how brands and data compilers and data providers and data brokers are compelled to provide clear notice and disclosure to consumers about precisely how their data is collected, what data is collected, and how it's used. To me, and just observing some of this over the last 28 or so years, and as a consumer myself, I feel like the data industry, and not to paint with a broad brush, there's so many different facets of what the data industry actually is doing an increasingly better job of working with consumers and current customers and potential customers to make sure there's a better sharing of information about precisely what those permissions are, how data is being used, that the consumer is ultimately in control of how that data is used and shared. And to me, the term data civics seems appropriate. It's the kind of thing that like IAPP and their work is doing to kind of help define the landscape. There's certainly groups that are working in Washington to kind of help come up with reasonable versions of consumer privacy as it relates to commercial purposes. And I do think data civics kind of defines that. But back to this, I think I can't help but think of the old saying, a well-educated consumer is our best customer, which I think was Cy Sperling and Sims Clothing back in the New York area in the 80s. And I think the same, if not more, applies to this very sensitive and sometimes not well understood by the general population world. So I think it's incumbent on us as marketing professionals, as data professionals specifically, to do a job of educating. And I think breaking it down in simple terms, I think data civics is this idea that brands and people who work in the data space and handle data are obligated to share with consumers what's collected, how it's collected, and for what purposes it's being used, and then to kind of bring that about in the broader context of this huge commercial space of the internet access, and how marketers want to do a good job of that value exchange. It's the same way a marketer wants to make you brand loyal, and a crucial component of brand loyalty, in my opinion, is clear notice and disclosure about how data is shared and used. And I think data civics sounds like a really good term to describe that endeavor and initiative. And I am particularly passionate about it. I have a lot of exposure to it. Oracle has a very high threshold and standard for all of its data providers. And we work in this space constantly as we bring on new providers. And I do feel like we do a good job of educating as we bring on new providers and helping navigate, today a fractured and fragmented landscape around potentially 50 different state laws, although about 5 are profoundly in enforcement or about to become in enforcement, with several others kind of emerging. And there is a hope for sort of a national privacy standard that sort of levels the playing field, so that within the United States, there's a common consensus of how this is all done. But I think data civics is the right word that describes this sort of exchange and the information sharing with consumers about how this all actually works.
And thanks for educating us on that. I think the way you break it down is very simple but very necessary. And what a great Cy Sperling reference. Sims. I got my first suit there when I was a
I
kid.
believe it was, I feel like that's the, watching public television, they were always sponsors. And I do believe that was sort of the refrain at the end of their little segment on public
Yeah.
television. The well-educated consumer is our best customer.
Just
That could be
that's
Men's
funny.
Warehouse too for that. But
No, that's another one. That's like, you like the way you look. I guarantee it.
that might be his tagline. Exactly.
That's his, yeah.
Exactly.
But yeah, Sims, I love it. What a nice shout out there. But so let's talk about you were talking about earlier, and I'm like this too. I kind of came into this business. I've been in this business 21 years, and so it's kind of like, the first email address I had was like a year before I graduated college in 99, 2000. So I kind of saw that explosion just like you. But how are privacy concerns different from those before the explosion of social media and the internet?
I mean, they're profoundly different because the venues and the channels, through which brands can reach consumers is, it's, on the curve, it's exponential geometric in terms of just those number of touch points. And so I do feel like, not to paint with a broad brush around generations, but generations that have grown up with kind of mobile devices as more than utility, for certain groups, mobile phone service specific function within their lives. For others, it is the lifeline. It is the natural extension of how they interact with the world. So as technology sort of, maybe the best way to think about it is technology is at this point now helping brands realize the promise of the delivery of an exceptional customer experience. And when you talk customer experience, it's not just product delivery, it's literally every level of interaction. And so since technology affords it, better data solutions affords it, now there are just so many more places where there's this kind of value exchange, the handshake of consent for the use of data and privacy. And I think that complexity, I could say in the last 10 years, it's grown more exponentially, if that's kind of the right way to think about it, but it continues to progress every day. So prior to social media specifically as a huge marketing force, it may have been slightly simpler, but it is now very complex, but it is kind of incumbent on brands to do that much of a better job to make sure that the delivery, the promise or the delivery of that exceptional experience is realized. And in doing so, a really critical part of that is making sure there's an understanding that when you give me your email address, I may market to you. Furthermore, I may share this data with other entities. I may share PII with other entities, and you have the opportunity, and it's incumbent on me to, make sure that if you ask me not to share that data with other entities, I abide with that. So, within this bigger value exchange of data civics is the learning that there are protocols that the data industry and marketers abide with, and that the consumer needs to be part of that conversation. And so now more than ever, with the extension, especially mobile, but not certainly exclusive to it, so many more touch points, so many more areas to pay attention to in terms of how we handle data and how we help consumers navigate that landscape and make them even a better partner.
Joe, identity is a common word in our industry now, and a lot of people use it and overuse it sometimes. But what does it mean to Oracle?
Identity is really a foundational process for Oracle. Specifically, we'll just confine this to the Oracle advertising side, but it's understanding this profound link between known, real people, real addresses, and digital identifiers and kind of in the digital identifiers in the digital ecosphere. So it's the ability to make privacy safe, privacy compliant connections between known and, if you will, unknown, or maybe indeterminate possibly, or there's a lot of terminology about how identity, the process works. But for Oracle, it's this foundational piece that powers all of our data solutions today. That's the delivery of accurate, scalable audiences in the digital ecosphere, accurate measurement, because ultimately the measurement of the activity that is tied to a digital ID, a registration ID, can be cycled back within the bounds of privacy, safety to real people, real households. So for Oracle, it's a foundational process around what we do, and it's also complex enough because of the first party data partnerships to kind of help provide that, a part of the suite and portfolio of solutions as we consider the post cookie landscape, which seems inevitable sometime in 2023. Today, that's the date. But as you consider that, identity then becomes even more important to make crucial linkages between, if you will, known and unknown or anonymized IDs.
And how are you guys working towards transition in a cookieless environment? How are you preparing for that?
It really is the blended suite of kind of approaches that hinge on, access to first party data, certainly contextual targeting. When you consider behaviors based on the content of specific, the context of specific content that an anonymous browser might be accessing as part of an open web strategy. There's opportunities to work on data-driven context that's informed, again, all in this privacy-safe way of just finding better ways to connect, taking the cookie out of the equation. You have consider the model where you have comprehensive US coverage. You have solutions, machine learning powered iterative solutions that help to power specifically contextual targeting opportunities in flight on the open web in terms of where browsing occurs. Consider that you also have the ability to tie with registration IDs into publisher platforms. You have the ability to tie into the walled gardens, but all of that is exclusive of a reliance on a cookie. Now that said, you're talking about a blended portfolio of solutions. So some of the work that we do when working on the first party data side is kind of back to this idea of consultative, where we work with brands to consider strategies, not only for acquisition, but also for reactivation, loyalty purposes, based on these same principles. Smart, responsible strategies around first party data, leveraging some other tools to kind of drive scale in the digital environments. And of course, with the huge rise of social commerce, especially, to consider linkages back to the walled gardens with registration IDs, which are exclusive of cookies. And then of course, to measure all of the efficacy of the efforts, if you will, because you have identity in the middle, tying the activity of these registration-based IDs back to known names and addresses. So it's part of this blended strategy that does not hinge on the cookie, but in fact, in Oracle's case, we've built out several pillars of our data strategy around accommodating for the absence of the cookie.
And speaking of the cookie, and there's obviously other ways that you mentioned. Do you think consumers are aware of their digital footprint, and how have their privacy expectations changed?
I think it's a good question. I think that consumers are becoming increasingly more of the conversation. I do think brands are doing a great job, an increasingly great job of this notice and disclosure piece that I kind of led with at the outset. I can tell you from some experience in working with the marketing department at Rutgers University, I have the privilege of sitting as an advisor on their board. We stood up an MBA case competition last year, and I was part of the group that helped to write the prompt for the MBA teams to come back with a solution. And we decided to go right at the challenge of, so now Google has deprecated the cookie, the browsers has deprecated the cookie. How do you advise your client to go to market? And I can tell you that the insights from just these brilliant teams of students about how to tackle that problem, and tackling that problem, providing P&Ls around different strategies and approaches. The team that won from Boston College provided just an incredible depth of detail in how they would utilize non-cookie based strategies to do that, hinging on social commerce, hinging on direct mail as a venue, hinging on utilizing social channels and built content to drive influencer marketing, utilizing emerging presences and avatars in the metaverse. What I mean to say is the consumer is becoming acutely more aware that their footprint, as they browse, as they interact, in these digital venues, is being leveraged. And I do think again, it's incumbent on us as professionals to be very forthcoming about what that means, how that impacts the availability of their data. The consumer is king in this case. In building out and delivering the promise, or the promise or the delivery of the exceptional experience is a trade-off, and that trade-off is making sure that consumers understand how their data is being leveraged to do so. And I do think consumers are getting more savvy and understanding it.
Yeah, I definitely think so as well. And I want to focus on the digital footprint. What do you think are some of the positives of consumers today?
I think, if brands do their job, and they are, again, increasingly, they're all doing their job exceptionally well, there's less noise, there's less inappropriateness, there's less wastefulness. And that's like wastefulness with a capital W, not only from the brands themselves, but as the recipient, you have less to try to navigate to understand what might be important and valuable to you. In the direct mail world, we always used to say, it was never junk mail if you didn't throw it out. If it was well targeted and appropriate, it was meaningful to you and might spur additional activities such as donating to a nonprofit, in addition to the commercial aspects of things. I think double goes for sort of our opportunity to do the same in the digital ecosystem, but by really, again, coming back to this idea of the handshake. The digital civics lesson culminates in a handshake with the consumer, and a really good, solid handshake. It's sort of a covenant. There's a responsibility as the steward of a consumer's data and as a data solutions provider, in aggregate of data that we receive to build our solutions, to do that job really, really well. And I think we're getting better. It's the same technology that allows for the promise and delivery of exceptional customer experience is the same technology that will allow us to manage this particular process much more flawlessly. So, with respect to this question, I really do think the digital industry, the data industry is stepping up, and we're required to do so not only legally but just outright. It just makes sense. It just makes sense because it goes to the heart of brand loyalty, and in the commercial sphere, nothing better, no better advocate for your brand than a loyal consumer and a loyal customer. And if you do this job well, then you're not only, you didn't only provide that exceptional customer experience in the delivery of a product or a service, but you also were very forthright. The mission that you as a brand live with, which has become huge in terms of how a brand distinguishes itself, is embodied in this consciousness of the social implications of what you do, and that goes double for the handling of data. Maybe that's the best way that I think about it. Is it's a bigger need than just the commercial side. It's just part of the architecture of how we all interact now, and it strikes me more and more every day as I get further and further into this business and career how important it is for brands to do that job, and they are doing it, and the technology is affording them the ability to do it.
Joe, a little bit on the lighter side of things. One of our staple question revolves around the LinkedIn messages that we all get. So what's a LinkedIn message that gets a response from you, and what's one that really annoys you?
Oh, a LinkedIn message that will get a response from me is an outreach from a former colleague. I try to purpose build. I've tried to purpose build my LinkedIn connectivity. I guess I've been very active since the platform started. I've always had a new business element to what I did, and to hear from a former colleague or a friend, to reach out not only about business but to kind of rekindle a connection is always wonderful. I think part of one of the messages, I don't hate anything, honestly. I find that a less targeted message as a targetable medium is a little annoying, especially when one considers if you're approaching a marketing professional to kind of build a bridge or help to build a bridge. I work really hard to try to make meaningful connections. I feel like that's one of my main roles. But when it's just so misplaced, and somebody didn't read below the fold of Oracle, so Oracle has a huge suite of products and offerings in the market. I'm on the Oracle advertising side. So if it's not well targeted or thoughtful, I guess I'm more inclined to dismiss one of those messages. But because I work at such a large company, I do get more mistargeted messages. And they're just, it's, I wish those individuals who are targeting me in those cases would be a little more deliberate in their research, because I try to, when I'm trying to cold call or prospect, I try to do the same.
Just rare to see somebody working for as long as you have it, a couple of different companies, but especially Oracle. So, what kind of excites you? What makes you work at Oracle for as long as you have?
First and foremost, the people, the teams. Our team, it's the team I work with is the best I've ever worked with, and that's in no way saying that the team I worked with at Adrian Rubin wasn't the best I worked with. The team I worked with at ALC wasn't the best I worked with. I've been very, very fortunate, and I've been at Oracle over 7 years, and this current group of people are incredible. They challenge me every day. We work to solve big problems. Our business is transformative, as you guys know well. Every day is a new set of challenges, a new set of accomplishments, a new set of failures and disappointments. It's all the things. And working with this group has just been amazing. My own team is incredible as well, and I feel very fortunate to have folks who are out in the industry who kind of move through working with me and are out in the industry. And I just, try to be helpful along the way. And for me, it's all about the people. If you ask me what business I'm actually in, it's the people business. It just happens to be a data application of the people business. My father reminded me of that many, many years ago, and because he himself was in the people business. So I kind of like to think about that. So the people first, the fact that we just have this huge engine and this huge compass needle that within Oracle can point at, like, due north at these projects and these workthroughs and workflows on building out smarter and better. It's just kind of, it's an infectious energy here. I've also had the privilege in my position, as we've kind of expanded our offerings to work with other sort of adjacent teams within other marketing pillars of Oracle, supply chain side, the e-commerce side. And again, it's just the excitement of data solutions plugging into these software solutions, and then just into the general strategy of brands is super exciting.
And I love that statement, the people business, because that's what I feel as well. I feel like it's relationships and partnerships.
Absolutely.
And like you, Joe, I hold that LinkedIn community that I try to hold it close to the vest, and where I know people who I'm happy to make referrals to. Before we get into know you a little bit on the personal side, we need to have the audience know you. I know you on the personal side, but I'd love the audience to get to know you as well. We talked a lot about first party data, and that's not easy for a company. You really have to trust an organization. How does Oracle ensure that trust when someone hands over their first party data?
We have a high standard. It's embedded in our contracts, and we work with brands to make sure they meet or exceed those standards. We kind of look at the entire landscape today across the boards. California sort of set a certain standard that I think a lot of other privacy policies at the state level are emulating in various angles. We've sort of enshrined that in our contracts, the covenants with the data providers. Every relationship in onboarding new data is consultative, at least as much as it's sales oriented, in terms of just providing information about our best practices as it's enshrined in our contracts. So we work really, really hard to maintain super high standards about that. And it's been an interesting challenge, but also very rewarding as you start to bring companies into that and brands into that fold, other data providers. But yeah, again, companies are stepping up. Independent of Oracle, they're out there working hard on that customer experience, and a key part of it is making sure that there's just a lot of information, clear, simple information about you're giving data to me. I am the steward of that data. You have the right to revoke that privilege, but here's how it works and why it works. And I just think there's a groundswell under it. I really do. I think on the drive to national privacy legislation, there will be more so. And I've just had exposure to just such a smart way of thinking about it, and I get the pleasure of understanding that and kind of building how I go to market off of those approaches. So it's been really great. And I do think it's mounting and continuing to grow.
Well, no, like I said, I love the way you put it. I agree with you. And Joe, for those people listening, tell us about, I went out, let's talk about some of the work you do first before we get into the personal side. You've been a board member before. You're active with the Direct Marketing Club in New York, now renamed the Marketing Club in New York, for which I am a board member of. So we do a lot of events there that help further the education and further the people joining this industry, ensuring that this industry is in good hands. And you've taken that even a step further, as you mentioned, with your alma mater there at Rutgers and doing some work there. So talk to us about that, and then talk to us about the personal side. What do you like to do? I personally know you're a gifted musician. Sorry to spoil that for everyone out there, but talk to us about the work you're doing with Rutgers, as you said, as well as the work and some of the hobbies. What do you like to do for fun?
Sure. No. So MCNY board work has been super rewarding, formerly DMCNY. The work as an advisor on the board of the marketing department of Rutgers has been super rewarding. And for me, it really crystallized. It was sort of an interesting, not unlike how I found my way into marketing, sort of an interesting path when I had the opportunity within the bounds of Oracle to start mentoring, to be part of the pilot program for mentoring. And I found that I really enjoyed that interaction and understanding what was important to emerging professionals, and how I could try to help. And I'm very careful about how I say that, how I can try to help, because I'm kind of still a work in progress myself, where this industry changes so quickly, the pace of world news changes so quickly. But it really crystallized for me when COVID happened. I have 4 nieces and nephews, all of whom are college age, and all of whom frankly struggled at some level coming through the pandemic, either graduating school or starting school. And it occurred to me that for my own sake, and I can only speak for myself, the best thing I could do with this time was to try to help. And trying to help, an opportunity to be an ear, to provide a reference, to kind of help solve a problem, if it's work related, if it's at the student level, project related, on the road to maybe capstone in an MBA program. There's just so much work that I think professionals in our space can do, and in trying to give back and to be helpful. To me, it's become so profound that as I contemplate kind of next phases of my own career, I see a version of it potentially where I get to do more of that as more of a vocation, thinking about the affiliation with Rutgers specifically. There's just so much to do. And it really is kind of back to this basic principle that, the world, the economy, things that govern the business experience for a professional are so variable and generally unpredictable. It's going to be okay. And the work you're doing as a student is important. The work you're doing on the drive through your professional career is important. And there's just going to be a lot of challenges and pivots. And, my own path is sort of a mini reflection of what I'm seeing and getting a chance to work with, especially students. And part of Marketing Club of New York is a big part of that mission as well, with our compatriots in Marketing Edge, which kind of parts of which folded into MCNY rather, the beginning of this year. The mandate to kind of provide a pipeline and a recruitment pipeline for students and internships. Again, just so much we can do as professionals to try to help. And I'm super passionate about it. And if anybody hears this and they want to find out more, link in with me. I'll be happy to share what I've learned, and maybe you'd find it interesting yourself. On the personal side, my wife and I love to travel. Kind of a little crimp in that, of course, over the last 2 years. We're very fortunate to have been able to do some very interesting travel over the years, and we look forward to the next opportunity to do so. One of the most interesting trips there was, again, the privilege of getting to go to Nepal and hike Everest Base Camp with a couple of friends.
Nice.
Sort of randomly, it was a vacation I did with longtime friends with whom we'd never vacationed, and they said, "Hey, we've got this great idea," and they sent us a couple of links, and then my wife and I signed up for the trip, and we said, "What did we sign up for? What are we in for?" But it was amazing. What an incredibly interesting part of the world, and again, a super real privilege to get to go see it. As you say, I play music. I'm a musician, or do I just own guitars? But I've been playing music, I don't know, since I'm a teen, and got the chance in the 90s to play with bands that got to tour from Boston to Baltimore, opening for a couple of national acts. Some of my colleagues and friends have seen the Long Hair Joe pictures, which are kind of startling, maybe a little bit, but the music is part of that heartbeat. Dave Brubeck, the famous jazz musician, once said, and I found it so profound for him to say, that the first thing you hear at the beginning of your life is your heartbeat, that rhythm. The last thing you hear at the end of your life is that heartbeat and that rhythm. And I just thought, wow, there's something about that, that somewhere in my purview, it's kind of there in the background always. So rhythm, diction, the beat, I think I'm always kind of inclined to find it. And I had the chance to express some of that playing music, and still playing guitar. I'm also a big reader. What you can't see behind this background are a couple thousand books. My wife and I had an addiction. We've kind of curbed it a little bit, but we're both avid readers, and there's just endless. It's boundless, the amount of things to learn and try to understand, and so I try to do that too. And just music, I think, is probably the most impactful one. It also drives the opportunity to see live performances, which we take every chance we can. Again, fortunate to live in the New York area and stay in the New York area all these years, and there's just every night of the week you could find something else to go do and see, and so we try our level best to do that. So I mean, those are some of the things I really enjoy. There are others, but those are sort of the big wheel ones. We actually are growing a garden. Years ago, when my wife and I met, we had a spot in the Rutgers community garden. This is back in the 90s. And so we put our name on a list here in Hoboken, New Jersey, and waited 4 or 5 years, and we got a spot in the community garden. So this year we're growing vegetables, which has just been, it's so fun to play in the dirt. It's so fun to kind of steward and shepherd something from seed to growth, and to kind of, reap the benefits of a harvest. I think there's something about that in the idea that I like to try to help in terms of working with students and other professionals when I get a chance, when they're kind enough to want to work with me. So it's really kind of cool. Like, there's some neat threads that I'm finding tie together as I try to step back from it and look at it a little bit more.
That's amazing. Yeah, no, I love it. I knew that. I knew most of that about you, which is good, but I didn't know about the garden. I didn't know about the bands you played with, but that's amazing, Joe. We appreciate. You're my modern day philosopher. I love listening to you. I love talking to you. We always talk shop. We always catch up on life and the industry.
Sure do.
And family. And I appreciate our friendship. And I appreciate you joining us here on the Marketing Stir podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, that is Joe Frick, the head of partnership development at Oracle Advertising and CX. I'm Vincent Petrofessa. That's Mr. Ajay Gupta. I haven't forgiven him yet, but I will. This has been another episode of The Marketing Stir. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks for listening to the Marketing Stir podcast by Stirista. Please like, rate, and subscribe. If you're interested in being a guest on the podcast, please email us at themarketingstir@stirista.com. And thanks for listening.